I'm never doing that again. Like, I'm not doing that, bro. You caught me.
Welcome to Video Game Book Club, the show where we pick, we play, and we discuss a video game each and every month. I'm your host, JP, and with me always, Ben Tizzle Toops.
JP, what is up, my brother? We are back. February 2025, Arco. I am so excited to talk about it. It was such a banger of a game.
Such a banger.
But I'm also so excited to announce this coming March 11th, JP and I will be appearing as guests on the Heroes Brush Hour Twitch stream. So if you're not familiar, Heroes Brush Hour is a Twitch stream run by a friend of ours. They do Warhammer mini painting competitively, where JP and I are both each going to have an hour to paint a Warhammer mini. Meanwhile, we're going to be getting assaulted by the chat. If you're in the chat, you're going to be able to redeem rewards to make us do goofy stuff while we're trying to paint these minis, like squats or singing or crazy stuff like that. So if that sounds fun to you, and you don't even need to know anything about Warhammer. JP and I both do not know anything about Warhammer.
Never played a game in my life.
So it's going to be a learning experience. It's going to be really fun. Get in the Heroes Brush Hour chat on March 11th and watch along. It's going to be a great time.
It's going to be at 9 p.m. Central, and we are so pumped to join Andrew and the gang painting some minis. I have never painted a mini. I have never played Hammerwatch games. I don't even know anything about them. I know that they release a game every 3 months, it seems like, and I'm like, what is it even? You know? I'm super excited, and I'm so pumped to talk about Arco today. What a banger of a game that really came out of nowhere that I had no idea about, and one of our listeners, one of our readers, book club readers in the Discord told us, yo, you guys need to check out this game. It looks so good. And he was so right, Ben.
So right.
Arco, like the best thing about the game, obviously, is for me, it was the combat. Like, it was so fun. I hadn't played something quite like it. And if you don't know how the game works, basically, it is a turn-based game. You play in like a field, like a battlefield area, and you can move your character around. That is your kind of turn.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like, I feel like when you think of turn-based combat, like things kind of happen one by one, but here it's just like everything is happening simultaneously. So it's like, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a Western setting. So there's like some bullet combat and stuff like that. And there'll just be bullets like flying all over the screen. And you have to like kind of chart out their paths to make sure that when you move on your turn, you're going to be avoiding the bullets or else you get hit. But yeah, it's like, it's chaotic, but also very like organized and fun. Like it winds up being such a fun mode of combat.
Yeah, there's a lot of bullet hell to this game, and usually when you think bullet hell, you think, oh, it's like real-time combat. But because you have that moment where you pause and you can see where everything is, you can see the bullets flying and the path that they're going to take in this like paused state, then you can plan out what your next move will be. However, you can't think about it too long, because depending on some actions that you do in the story beats of the game, you will have this guilt meter or this guilt thing kind of around you, where if you decide things that are quote unquote maybe bad or more villainous or more like revenge focused, then these ghosts will appear and they will follow you when the game is in its paused state. So you can't think about it too much. If the ghost gets to you, it'll damage you. So you want to really quickly think about where you want to move, what action you want to take, and then you move away from the ghost, and then also you have to move away from the bullets. So it really becomes very chaotic, even though turn-based maybe kind of makes it slightly reductive. People don't want like a slow-paced game. This is very, very fast-paced, and you have to keep moving at all times.
Yeah. I thought that ghost mechanic you talked about was definitely one of the more like unique aspects of the game. When it first got introduced, I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting, whatever. Like, it's just a little mechanic to kind of nudge you along in combat and like keep things moving so you don't sit there planning out the perfect course like the whole time. But man, there are some fights in this game where it got like so chaotic
Yeah.
and hectic with everything, because the ghosts also leave like sort of like a trail almost, where there's like this ghost matter on the floor that expands every turn of combat. So you'll be in this big boss fight, and like you have ghosts physically chasing you around, you have actual enemies firing at you and trying to hit you. You've got, these kind of poison squares of this ghost matter on the ground that you're trying to avoid. And it's just like so hectic, in it kind of in the best way though, because like it's just it forces you to think quickly and like react to things and like kind of keep it going. So it's really interesting.
It's so good.
It's such a cool mode of combat.
Some of the most, some of the best boss fights too were these like kind of hidden bosses or hidden temples and stuff that you would go through. There's so many secrets in the game, and depending on some actions that you have within the story, you can find these things. And man, they're so hard. Like there's some brutal fights in this game. Some of them that I had to restart like 15 times to beat it. But like, I like a challenge. It never feels unfair. It's just like, oh man, like I moved in the wrong way, or I thought about my move way too long and a ghost got me and I'm already on the back foot because I have one less HP. Now, because there's 4 different characters that you play as, the combat never really feels dull because they all play differently. And actually, some of these characters I thought were easier than others. There's one that basically she is all physical and melee weapons. So she has to be right up to everyone's face, really, really close. But if you're that close, then obviously you're going to get hit really easily. So how do you mitigate that like damage that you're going to receive with trying to also deal a lot of damage? So that was really hard. Whereas some other characters that maybe stand back a little bit more, you have a little bit more freedom to move around and dodge things and kind of prepare your attack. So yeah, it was, man, the combat, we can talk about it like so much. It's so good. But I think there's this charm that the game has based on kind of like the 8-bit pixel art kind of format that it has, combined with an audio that isn't 8-bit, that it's full of guitars, it's full of like wailing Spanish singing voice, which is just absolutely beautiful. The story is tragic, so you can feel that tragedy in the singer's voice in these songs. And the blend of like pixel art but no pixel music, kind of like, obviously music can be pixelated, but you know what I mean, that kind of like retro style music, it really combined beautifully for me. I don't know how you feel, but like it kind of touched my heart in those moments.
No, totally agree. And I feel like the game, because there's not like, I feel like most of the soundtrack of the game is just kind of like really good kind of background like vibe music, like setting kind of the vibes of the different scenes you're in. But then I feel like the game does a really good job of picking these like really impactful moments to then drop those like lyrical, like you said, Spanish, super emotional songs in these like really emotional, parts of the game when things are kind of all going wrong and stuff like that. So I feel like, to me, like obviously this is a very small team. This is like a very small indie
people,
game. So very small team of people making it. So obviously limited resources, but I think they use that to their advantage to like really, maybe they can't have this fully voiced soundtrack like throughout the entire game, but they can, pick their spots and really kind of hammer home some of those emotional notes.
Definitely. And I think like, even though, we'll talk more about the story, we'll talk about the whole story, actually, Video Game Book Club. And it's super tragic and it's revenge focused. There's also like some really like, it's charming because this indie dev team like made it kind of funny in its writing too. It didn't take themselves, they didn't take themselves as seriously with the writing in different ways. Like sometimes characters, because they didn't have like maybe different like portraits to show their emotion, they would just like use like emojis, like not like full emojis, but just like colon and then parentheses to make a smiley face or something. And sometimes that kind of grounds you a little bit and you remember, hey man, I'm playing a game from a small team. It's so human, it's so beautiful, it's funny, it's silly. They're like really giving me a lot of like who they are through this game, and I just appreciated that so much.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. There's so much personality that kind of shines through within the different kind of dialogues and interactions. So we've been kind of, alluding to, some of the story of the game and stuff like that. Do you want to, so why don't you set the stage for all our listeners? Tell us, like, how the story starts to unfold, and also just a bit about like the general setting of the game.
Yeah, totally. So the setting of the game is in a kind of like made up world, let's say. Like it doesn't really say like, hey, we're in California, or hey, we're in Mexico, or hey, we're here. It's more like these different tribes that grab inspiration from different old like countries, or maybe not countries, but like civilizations in America, the continent, not the country, are kind of all in this new kind of world and new map that you're kind of traversing. So the game starts with you as a kid from the Iyo tribe, which kind of reminds you of, if you think like the west, like southwest United States, like North Mexico, that like deserty, into like California, New Mexico, that vibe of that civilization that lived there. That's how you start. You're just traveling with your family, and you start hearing these whispers, these rumors of these newcomers. And the newcomers are these kind of bandits, these Western settlers that are coming into this civilization, and they are trying to take over, and they're trying to basically, build machines, build oil rigs, and kind of make this a Western, a new civilization instead of like how it should be, the land for the people that live there. So let me set the stage of like the first 20 minutes of the game. Basically, you start in this Act 1. The game is divided in 5 acts, so it kind of tells you, hey, you're in Act 1 right now. You're a curious young little lad. Your name is Teco, or Tizo. No, Teco. Teco is your name.
No, Teco.
Teco is your name. And you're traveling with your family, and you're trying to pay visit to the sacred tree. Now, Teco is kind of becoming a little bit impatient because the family is a little bit nervous about visiting the sacred tree. And you're like, why? Like, let's go. He's just a young kid. He just wants to do things now. They are nervous because the newcomers, someone saw some, newcomers or these new people, you don't know who they are. And they're kind of worried, like, hey, they don't really look that friendly. I think something might go wrong. It seems like they have like maybe different, maybe not weapons, but different technology that we do. So let's just maybe take it easy. Let's rest for the night. Let's not go there. But also, this is how the combat works. And so you and your dad kind of start sparring. You get like a small little side quest where you go and pick up like maybe some herbs or something for one of the villagers. And you kind of get introduced to this really cool combat system, as we talked about. And basically what ends up happening is Teco becomes really impatient. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he goes, nah, man, my family doesn't want to go to see the sacred tree. I really want to go see the sacred tree, so I'm just going to go by myself. And you get there, and then obviously you find the newcomers. And now you're just in a state of panic. They want to kill you, literally. And so you start fleeing and trying to fight back. Eventually, you can't. And I think the game kind of forces you to lose, and maybe there's a way to win that fight, but there's like 4 or 5 bandits. Your skills are super limited, and you just kind of fall to them. And this little kind of, it's not really a cutscene, it's just like text happens where you see that everyone in the village gets massacred, basically obliterated by these bandits, and you don't really know what happens to Teco. And that's kind of how this story starts.
So like you said, Act 1 is very much so like supposed to be the tutorial. It like kind of introduces, there's some, I feel like, choices you're going to have to make along the way that are going to end up, defining how the story goes. I don't think there's really any of those choices in Act 1. Like there's kind of the illusion of choice, like when your character wakes up in the middle of the night and kind of wants to go visit the tree, and I think regardless of whatever you do, you end up doing it.
I think so.
But there are some like impactful choices that will end up affecting the game down the road, but I feel like this isn't really one of them. But you touched on something interesting, which is this like magic tree element. So this is like otherwise a very realistic setting, like the landscape, the technology. There's like a blend of, some older types of weapons like bow and arrow and stuff like that, but there's also like kind of rudimentary firearms, like kind
Yeah.
of muskets, revolvers, a few Gatling guns here and there. So kind of like a very realistic setting, but there's also this side of like more kind of fantastical, like fantasy stuff. Like there are magic elements to the game. Like there is a magic, and it's not like, a secret thing. Like pretty much everyone knows about the magic, and it's fueled by this resource that they call dust that kind of becomes important later in the game. And yeah, so it's like, you start the game and it's like, oh, you have to go visit the sacred tree or whatever. And you're kind of thinking like, oh, okay, this is, whatever, maybe just like a spiritual thing for this tribe or whatever it is. But no, like there are very real like magic elements to the game. And it's pretty interesting as it goes on.
Yeah, definitely. I think also it's not just with like the combat and anything, but like all the animals and like the flora and how that translates in the game. I touched on how these aren't like real societies. They kind of like grabbed all the ones that existed in the past and kind of put them together in this game, which I think like honors them really well and shows the differences between them, which is something really important to me. But also it's like, yeah, there's like llamas running around, and if you think about like Central California or that kind of area, that's not or alpacas or something. And yeah, it's really cool to see all of that. There's so many items in this game. A lot of them are like health items, and all of them are like different fruits and maybe some that don't actually exist, but maybe they're like a representation of like a real fruit in like, yeah, the Mesoamerican kind of culture, and even like South America. I mean, there's some, you visit some monks in the second act that to me reminded me more of like Andes, like Chile and some parts of Peru, like that kind of older civilization, which is really cool. But Benny, why don't you tell me, so how does Act 2 kind of start, and how do you go from the tutorial to really the main part of the game?
Yeah, so like you said, the game starts with this guy Teko, right? So he sneaks off in the middle of the night, goes to see the magic tree, gets ambushed, it doesn't go well, and like the whole pack of people that he's traveling with is like wiped out. And so that's how Act 1 ends. You start Act 2, and you are now a different character named Tizo. So you're no longer Teko, you're Tizo. And Tizo is this like, very gruff looking guy. He's just like got this red poncho, big bushy mustache. He's got the sombrero on, pure vibes with Tizo. And he's very just like blunt, like you have conversations with people and there's no like mincing words. But he, as you start going, you're kind of just a lone traveler by yourself going through this land, looking for work basically. And, you wind up talking to a few people, and in those conversations, there's like some allusions to, all the people you've lost in your past and stuff that kind of makes you think, okay, this is probably the same character as before, but nothing that like concretely links it. But yeah, so you are Tizo now. You're going around fighting newcomers, fighting, bugs, because for whatever reason you fight bugs. A lot of bugs and lizards in this game. Like they're a big problem in this world apparently. But yeah, so you're going around looking for work. You come across a city or a town, I guess you would say. Yeah. In the town, there are some people that you used to know, or the, I guess, descendants of somebody that you used to know. And so you start kind of helping them out. You start doing a few tasks for them here and there. And eventually you kind of come back to this town and it's been like totally ransacked. Yeah. Like it's been run through. Everybody is dead. There's like one survivor. There's like a child left behind that you can choose to help or not. And yeah, basically everyone's dead. You don't know who did it. There's like a remnant, sort of an artifact that belongs to the Kanek tribe, which is more of like, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe like the more Maya type people.
Definitely, yeah.
So they reside more in like kind of jungle areas with temples and stuff. But there's like an antique or a amulet, I think it is, left by a some sort of Canic person, maybe. So
And the
all you know,
mechanics are
that's
known
really
as like more like they're warriors. They fight a lot, so it's just like
yes,
it's a pretty easy conclusion for Tizo to say like, all right, maybe I need to go figure out like if they did this, and
exactly.
also Tizo like Ben said, I mean he is full of this like grief, and he like walks around with just like he has had a terrible past, and he just wanders around, and this hits him really hard because maybe he was going to settle at one point, and maybe he was going to be with this tribe. He found people that he knew, and he was like, okay, maybe I can be with them, even though he doesn't really say it, but you can kind of see that maybe that's where his heart was headed. And then he comes back and the whole tribe is gone again. And so in the first like couple hours of the game, you already experience two different like massacres really, and you're just like, dang, this game is sad. This game is sad, and you just feel this, like the player starts feeling this revenge for both Teko and Tizo. Like I need them to kind of get justice, and these whoever they are, if it was the newcomers or whoever did this, like they need to pay. And so Tizo basically goes on this quest to go find if the Canics actually did this, or who else has done this. And so the first, I think, place that you go to is you find the monks, which I talked about a little bit, and they live in the mountains. They have these like houses that built on the mountaintops, and they kind of remind me, if you think maybe a little bit of like if you know Emperor's New Groove, maybe a little bit of that with a little bit more like Chile, like Andes kind of civilization. You mesh them together, and that's kind of who you find. And they tell you, hey, we have some information for this, but first you gotta do something for us. And it's like, all right, yeah, always. Every game is like that, right? So you kind of do a couple quests for them. I think you go to a temple, a different type of temple. And in that temple, you fight a really interesting creature. And that is the big bad, it's a moth, right? It's a big bad moth.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
That fight was the first kind of like big boss fight that you get. That is, first, I think it's optional. You don't have to awaken this moth. I'm pretty sure, but I can be corrected. And two, it's so hard. Like it's the first fight that I had to replay like a few times because I wasn't getting through it. There's also this thing that happens in this fight that sometimes the moth was moving while the game was kind of quote unquote paused, and you have to like keep moving and keep doing your action. And I was playing on controller, and I actually think that was a little bit harder for me. I think if you're playing on mouse and keyboard, it's probably a little bit easier to just like point somewhere and like press your ability and just kind of run that way. With the controller, you have to use the bumpers to go through each skill, and sometimes my not cursor, but like I was selecting a skill that was really far away from the other one, especially once you have higher levels and you have like 10 skills. And I had trouble getting to what I needed to pick. Usually I play games on controller by default because I play a lot on my Steam Deck too. So I don't want to like go from mouse and keyboard to, kind of controller on the Steam Deck and then back to mouse and keyboard. And so this is one of those games that played beautifully on the Steam Deck, but because I was playing on controller, I think it was slightly harder than playing on mouse and keyboard.
Yeah. So like we kind of alluded to already, there's in all of the different acts of this game, for the most part, you're playing as a different character, and each of those characters has like a different combat style. And so the first, the second act of the game, I guess. So you're Tizo, and you have basically your main weapon is your bow, right? Mm-hmm. Named after, the Arco, like the title of the game, obviously.
Yeah.
But so as Tizo, you're mainly like a bow guy. The combat style is mostly, it's really interesting because with the bow, there's like a little bit of a lag time with the arrows you fire, because like everything in this game is a projectile, and the projectiles have like travel distance. Like very few things in this game are an instant action. So like if you want to take a shot with your bow, there's like a little bit of a wind up to do that, and you have to make sure nobody's next to you and is like going to hit you while you're doing that wind up. But yeah, what did you think of like the combat style of Tizo? I thought it was like relatively fun. There's a throughout each act there's like some different kind of followers that you can pick up throughout that will like join you for a short period of time on your journey that act as like a new combatant. And I think the one in the first one, or at least the one I found, was like basically a different version of Tizo. It was like Tizo but blue instead of red.
Yeah.
And he had like a pretty similar style of combat as well. Like it was very like bow, run around, like, sneak a few melee hits in here and there. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this was such a good introduction to the combat mechanics because it teaches you about like the lag times and about the wind ups and kind of planning your next actions. There's like a few different moves that have like a one turn delay, so you can like lob a big arrow up in the air that lands the turn after the next turn. And yeah, I think all of these like early fights and boss fights and the more like difficult boss fights like you're talking about kind of are teaching you a lot about those mechanics.
Yeah,
kind of along the way.
Tizo is the well-rounded guy. He has some melee attacks, which are also kind of projectiles, like Ben's saying. You have to pick a trajectory for it, and then they'll move. And maybe either it's like a splash attack, if it's like, some sort of like slice with a dagger, or a direct kind of hit. And he has his arco, his bow, and he has plenty of different bow skills. And it's really interesting too, because some of them like say, hey, this will land in like 1 or 2 turns, but really like every projectile that you wind up is like a 2-turn thing. You can take a action after you hit or you like make an attack with your bow, and the arrow is still traveling when when the game is quote unquote paused, and you can choose something else to do, where you can dodge, you can wait to regain magia, which is magic in Spanish. And all of your skills take that magia. Maybe like it's like your mana or something. Also, one thing that we didn't mention is that you level up in this game and you have a big skill tree. So as you pick up these characters that kind of help you in these acts, if you find like the combat too difficult, for example, the mercenary that you pick up, the blue Tizo, you just pay him like however many coins, and he joins you. Or maybe there's a way to convince him without paying him, but I told him no, thank you, because I'm sad. I'm in the quest for revenge. I was being like, I had like plenty of guilt playing as Tizo. I think my guilt meter was probably like super high, and I was picking every action that made me kind of like the grumpy, kind of gruff guy that Tizo is. I was really playing into that story beat, and it made the game really hard for me. But I thought because he's so well rounded, he was the easiest probably to play as. His bow attacks were really strong. You can get out of a bad situation with like a dash attack. You have your dodge roll, you have your dash as well. So, I would focus mainly, because his attacks were already so strong, into getting more magia. In my head, I feel like I keep calling it magia, but really it's magia. I don't know why I did that. More magia, and so that I can do more attacks in a row, and more HP and stuff. And then once I kind of max that out and the ability unlocks as well, then I started getting all the skills. But no, I thought every act felt different, and every act I think kind of got a little bit harder. I do think that Act 3 is probably the hardest, just because you go from like someone who is more range heavy to like completely melee. But then Act 4 I thought was almost like the peak of how this battle system works. And I couldn't get enough. I was like, can you make a roguelike that works like this actually? So I can just do the combat over and over and over again. But really not every game has to be a roguelike. I know, not every game has to be a roguelike.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But yeah, so like you said, you complete this task for the monks up in the mountains, and they kind of point you towards one of the major cities. I think Terminus is what it's called. And they kind of tell you, hey, there's a group of newcomers in what's called the Red Company. Yeah. And they're kind of, huddled up in this big city, kind of, plotting their next move. They probably are involved with, what happened at the village. You should go seek them out. And so that's what you do. You head to this major city. there's a few kind of, random encounters and things that happen along the way, maybe a few secrets. I feel like I missed the secrets in the first act. Each act has like a major secret
Yeah.
involved with it, and I don't think I got it in the first
I
act.
think
Did
I
you?
think this one was the moth, and maybe the quest that the monks make you go to isn't the moth, and maybe I have them confused. But once you beat the moth, a kind of like a evil artifact comes out of the moth, and you can use that to. I think there's one artifact per act, starting from Act 2. And if you have all three of them, then there's like this big secret probably at the end of, in Act 5. But unfortunately, I didn't get it. I was trying to do it on my playthrough, but I kind of messed up in Act 3 and I couldn't get it. But I think that's the secret. There's usually, yeah, because I'm thinking now the way you get to the moth is there's these little, the way that the game looks, you kind of go from left to right in this kind of like almost like a side scrolling game.
Right.
And you have this beautiful background and it really does look so gorgeous. But sometimes when you go to these like caves or temples or different like more dungeons, I guess, it doesn't look like that anymore. And you have this like top view and more like a bird's eye view kind of, and you kind of walk around. And in some of them, that's where the secrets lie. So there's a wall and it looks like any ordinary wall, but you can just try to hit it or go and interact with it, and then you realize, oh, there's something behind there, and then that's kind of how you find them. So they like it's very hard to find every secret because you really have to kind of check every single wall, like really walk around every place that you go to its perimeter and try to figure out like where you can go. So I think I figured out the Act 1 secret, but I think I missed other secrets on the way. But one place that you do go to in this before you get to like that main city in Act 2 kind of finishes, you go to Tuxaun, which is the kind of Azteca and Maya like combination like civilization. That's where the Canucks live, and you kind of like discover them for the first time. I think there you kind of understand that, hey, it wasn't the Canucks that actually did the massacre of like your old buddy. It was the Red Company, and then Tizo's blood like starts boiling, and then he's like, the Red Company again, like it's time to end those motherfuckers. Literally, I think honestly that's probably what he says, like word for word.
Probably.
So
yeah, probably.
so then you go and whenever you reach the last like when you reach that city, I think there's like a fight that happens when you first get there, and then you kind of hide, and you get to you go to this bar, and the barkeep is like totally against the Red Company, and he's like your ally, and he says, hey, you can like rest here before you go on your like revenge quest, basically. And that's kind of how Act 2 ends. Can you remind me what that last fight is, if you remember?
Yeah, it's just so you get to the major city, you get to Terminus, and that there's like a bar that the Red Company people frequent, and so you kind of camp it out, or you can camp it out, or you can maybe go in guns blazing. But you camp it out, and then like eventually some head honcho comes out, and it just starts a big fight. So you it's a pretty hard fight. I think I had to try this one a few times, but because I think this is probably the first like Gatling gun you encounter, where some of the Red Company enemies have like guns where it's just they shoot like one projectile and you just like dodge or whatever. But these, like, they just spray bullets everywhere,
So
and
tough.
it's like so hard to dodge around. So you have to like, I don't know, kite the bullets around. Basically,
Yeah.
it's really funny. But yeah, this was a pretty hard combat encounter, and you're kind of left at the end of it like beaten and bloodied. But yeah, I mean, you win, but like at what cost, basically? And basically, there's like the guards are going to be coming. They're going to be looking for you. They're obviously you just started this huge scrap in the middle of this major city. So yeah, like you said, you kind of duck into this bar. The bartender, thankfully, is like a Red Company hater like yourself. And yeah, he just kind of says like, take a seat. Let's talk about this. And that's the end of Act 1.
Yeah. Act 2. And then Act 2. It's tough. Yeah, the tutorial, it only lasts like 45 minutes.
Act 1, Part 2.
Act 1, Part 2. And then you start with Act 3. So now you the game starts again, basically. And you are Itzae. And Itzae is a lady warrior. She's massive. She's like 6 feet, 0.5, maybe 6'5". Oh my God. I'm really bad with like feet and inches. She's like 2 meters tall, 195 or something like that. And she's like super buff, and she is all guns blazing. She's like, let's freaking go. I love fighting. I want to be like the best warrior of all time. I want people to sing my songs of battle. And she's just the most fun character, I think. I think a lot of games, like, you know, they could have made the female protagonist like kind of, I don't know, more like, I don't even want to say ladylike because that sounds like terrible and reductive. But I just love how like they made him really strong and they made him really fun.
Yes.
And they just kind of like empower these indigenous, really, because that's what, if you want to use that word, like who they are. And it's just awesome to see that. So I really commend the developers for doing that. For every character, it's just a badass. And sometimes they just don't make every character a badass, right? So,
right.
But basically, Itsai, she's like a young warrior, and she's ready to kind of like take her next step into what it means to become a warrior. And so you start basically by doing a small little tutorial. I think the game is like trying to tell you, hey, like this is slightly different, how you're going to play this character. She's all about like melee fighting. I think you have like a jab attack and then like a straight up punch, and that's all you get. And you fight basically your tribe mates because you're kind of like hyped up and you're like, yeah, I'm like the baddest warrior of all time. Like, give me the next thing. And then the leader of the tribe, or maybe like someone like, you know, superior position to you, says, okay, like for you to make the next step, first you got to chill out a little bit. And two, like if you really want to become a warrior, then you want to go to the arena and prove yourself, prove that you are like capable of all this. And she's like, bet, let's do that. But before she goes, she does this little quest. And when she does this quest, something happens to her. And when she comes back to her village, they hate her. And they say, you have been tarnished. And because she has been tarnished, basically they don't want anything to do with her. And they tell her, you either like get rid of that, you know, like hex that you have, or literally never come back.
Yeah. Yeah, and the game basically, so you're kicked out of the village. You're essentially seen as cursed, like, by everyone in the village now. And they're just like, sorry, you cannot be here. You have to go. And so you're just pushed. And Itse, I think, is supposed to be like a younger character, like sort of more in her teens. And like kind of a fledgling warrior, basically, that's like kind of itching to go out on her own. But also the way it happened is like very sad in a way, because she's been kind of rejected by her tribe. And so, you basically you kind of have the option here. You can either go to the arena to like test your mettle, basically, or you can go seek like a religious order, I think, to help you deal with this hex somehow. So I'm interested to hear which one of those paths you took.
So I definitely wanted to do the arena because I thought it would be super fun. And, you know, there's a lot of like there's a lot of things that happen in between, like when she starts this quest and kind of like the peak of like her story. But there's a point where you have this like forking path, and you either go to the holy ground, I think it's called, or the high ground, to kind of get rid of this curse, or you go to the arena and become like the best warrior of all time, basically. And that's kind of how you find that glory that you're seeking. And I accidentally went to the holy ground, and I kind of cleansed myself from the curse. Yeah, I didn't want to. It was just one of those things where like maybe I was clicking too fast and I was reading maybe too quickly, and I kind of missed that it said like, hey, this is a path of no return. When you look at the map and you choose where you can go, if it has a dashed line between 2 points, that means that you can travel back and forth between those points as you see fit. But if there's like arrows pointing one way, that means that it's a one-way road only. You go there and that's like your decision. Usually it's not as punishing. You go there once, maybe there's a battle that's kind of tough, and then you can kind of circle around and go back to that starting position where you were. But in this case, this is like the first like really big decision that you have to make, especially for Itsai. And yeah, I made that decision. So there was no big fight for me. It was kind of like she kind of like purifies herself, it's feels great, I guess. For me, I was kind of grumpy, so I was like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I'm like, so I'm cleansed. It's great. I can go back to my tribe or whatever. But yeah, what did you pick?
Yeah, so I don't think I fully understood that it was like an either or situation. So I think I saw I basically inquired about the religious route. And whatever NPC I was talking to was kind of like, just so you know, this is like, a one-way street. Like if you go down this route, there's kind of no coming back from it. And so I was like, okay, well that maybe is like kind of end of act, so I'll like save that and I'll go to the arena, not realizing that the arena was also like an exclusive path that like blocked you from the other one. So I was just like, let me go to the arena first, and then obviously like I, got pulled into the arena. And what happens there is basically there's kind of progressive rounds of combat. And so once you go in, first of all, you have to like earn a certain rank in the arena to participate in the actual tournament. So you have to fight like, I think 6 fights, and they don't have to be in a row. Like in between fights, you can go get supplies and heal up and stuff like that. But once you've beaten all 6 fights, then you can enter the tournament. And the tournament is like, I think 5 or 6 rounds of combat in a row. But between each round of combat, you go into this little like staging area where there's a healer, but the healer will only heal you like a certain amount, like 3 hearts or so. So you don't get a full heal if you're damaged enough. They sell you like basic supplies, but not everything that you need to like be successful in combat. So like as you go, it's getting progressively harder and harder. And there's some hard rounds of combat, but then at the end, you get to like the final championship round, and you walk in the arena, and your opponent basically just like drops dead. And so all of the like guards and spectators and the runners of the tournament think you cheated, basically. Wow. They think you like poisoned your opponent somehow. You get kind of you get arrested pretty much and like thrown in prison. And that's kind of how like the end of Act 2 starts. Once you're in prison, you meet it. So in the tournament, in one of the rounds of the tournament, you get paired up with somebody, like a combatant on your team. Her name is Gina, I think. And she is like, so where Ite is like the big tank, like, get in people's faces, elbow them, slap them, whatever. Gina is very much like run and gun. Like she only has like 3 points of health, so she can die like that. But she's like very maneuverable. She like kind of dips in and out of combat. So it's like a very good complement to ET, and it was really fun to play as her. But you get thrown in prison, and Gina's there as well. So you can choose to either break her out or not. I, obviously chose to break her out. And then you kind of go down the quest line of like finding, because you didn't poison them. Yeah. And so it becomes like, who set you up? And, it turns out that it was the Red Company, shocker. So you kind of go like you got to go seek out the Red Company to enact revenge on them. And then, there's a big encounter. There's a really hard fight that I was like very, very ill prepared for, because I did not realize that it was, a one-way trip to like get to the encounter. So I was like, oh, I'll just go like check it out. But once I got there, I couldn't turn back, and I didn't have any supplies basically for the fight. No. So I think I played this fight like, I don't even know, 50 times. Jeez, like it was so hard for me, because I had like maybe 1 healing item, and I literally had to get to the point where I was like perfecting the fight. Like I knew where everything was going to go. Yeah. I knew what everyone was going to do at what time. I would like kill one enemy and then be perfectly positioned to where the next one was going to spawn, and just like immediately elbow them. And like, it was crazy. But, at the end, it kind of felt good to like get to have that like perfect run. But man, it was so hard when I was like just struggling. It was tough.
So tough. Even if you pick the other route, you eventually do the same thing, basically. I just didn't get the whole arena thing. But I also found a traveler this time, with Tizo, I was like, or with Tizo, I was kind of like, Sorry, I was reading my notes and it said Teko and I got confused again. With Tizo, I didn't grab anyone. It was solo act. But with Itzae, I had a companion too. And actually, I think the person that I had was like a rifle person. So they just, with like a bow, or maybe it was, I don't even remember if it was actually a gun, but it was super good compliment. So I was like all up in someone's face, but I had like help. You eventually do the same fight and it's so difficult. And I also think that like, because of the route that I took, I didn't have as many levels with Itzae as I did with Tiso. And so like, I hadn't unlocked a lot of her stuff. And so, Not that you need that much stuff. Like really, her jab attack is so strong because it hits for 2, and then it gives you like a +1 damage for your next attack. So you just kind of do that. But also, that's my cat if you hear him. There's something that they introduce in the Itzae combat that is instant actions. So because Itzae is like in people's faces and stuff, and she gets damaged really easily, she has these abilities that are instant actions that help her in those situations. So one of them, and you can kind of go 2 routes with it. You can either do the defensive route where you use this instant action in the next like 2 turns maybe, or maybe in the next turn, every damage that you receive is reduced by 1 point. Or you go the opposite and you have an instant action where you increase your damage output by like +3, but you also increase your damage received by like +2 or something like that. So you kind of have to choose, but it makes it really interesting because you can pick like 2 attacks and then just have both of those things and then choose depending on your situation what you need to do. Regardless of that though, this fight is brutal. Like I think in the Discord everyone was saying that it took them like the most amount of tries to do this fight.
Yeah.
Except maybe one person said that they were cracked. But it is what it is. We were not cracked. And it was hard. I also think that something that helped me was because I cleansed myself, I didn't have a lot of guilt. And because I didn't have a lot of guilt, I didn't have a lot of ghosts following me. So I could think a little bit more with Itzae, with Tiso. Bro, my guilt was so big. I had no time to think. Eventually, though,
that's so funny.
After you finish this fight, Itzae finds herself also in the same bar that Tiso is at. And so you kind of put things together like, okay, this is where all of our main characters are going to meet. And finally, then you can go into like the quest for revenge because the Red Company is the bad guys here, right? And you want to go find El Gallo, which is... El Gallo is it's the male of a chicken. What's the male of a chicken in English?
Rooster.
The rooster. So he's the rooster. Thank you. And so then Act 4 starts. And the interesting thing about Act 4 is that you're not just one character, but you're 2. In every other act, you're one character and you can, recruit someone, whether you pay them or they just join you because you help them. And their skill trees are super limited. Like they don't really grow. They're purely a side character. They have like 2 or 3 abilities and that's it. Whereas, your main characters have like 30 or 40 and you can go and try to find them all in your skill tree as you level up. But Chio and Afur are 2 characters with complete skill trees, and they're twin siblings. Chio, girl, and Afur, boy, and they are so much fun. So why don't you tell us how like Act 4 starts?
Yeah. So like you said, Chio and Afur is such a unique mode of combat because when you start, both of them have, because obviously you're 2 characters now. So like in order to balance that, I think both of them start a little underpowered compared to some of the other characters. So like as Afur, all you can do is like shoot a lob arrow and like swap places with someone. And when you swap places with someone, it also stuns them. So you realize that you can like, okay, I can fire an arrow at like my position and then swap this person and it'll hit them next turn or stuff like that.
I think everyone has that aha moment with Afur, like, oh my God, I'll shoot arrows at myself and then swap. It's so good.
Exactly. And then whereas Chio is more kind of more agile, like a little bit of melee, a little bit of ranged for the time being, but nothing too crazy. But it starts out, Chio and Afur are basically trying to conduct a transaction. They have a horde of dust, which is basically what's powering like the magic kind of elements of the game, the magia. You have this dust. You're trying to make a deal with somebody to like offload the dust, and the deal totally falls through. Like the money gets stolen, the dust disappears, so you're left with nothing. Whereas you started with this like load of dust, and now you just have nothing. So you get totally ripped off, and you basically just set out to right that wrong. You're looking for the dust, you're looking for the money, and kind of going along the path that it takes you during that process.
Yeah, and their personalities are so fun because like Afur, he's like all business, like, hey, we're doing this because we need the money and we gotta like, like, hey, no playing around. Like we have to do this transaction. And Chio is all like, she's hilarious. She's kind of like mischievous and stuff. She's so funny. And as twin siblings, they just like, have this very good banter between them. Also, they're very interesting characters in contrast with Itzae, who is more like, I guess you would call it like a typical indigenous kind of like, if you think of a Mayan and Aztec person, like that's kind of what they look like. And Tiso is more like your gruff like sombrero guy, poncho, big mustache, which is it's great. But Chio and Afur are very interesting because Afur is wearing kind of like almost like a turban, around his head, because they come from the desert, and of course that's I think like a forgotten thing. The ecosystem of America as a continent is so vast, and you get everything that you think about indigenous people, and you kind of like are diminutive with like what you think. But if you look at the big picture of like everyone that lived in like the new world, quote unquote, it's so many different rich cultures, rich different types of people that lived here, that obviously the game kind of is making the comparison that they all got taken over by the newcomers, which is like the Europeans that came over to the continent. So it's really cool to see like they tried to represent as much as they could without making direct comparisons, because they were trying to kind of just make you look like, hey man, there's like all these different types of people. Anyways, I thought that was really good and something that like touched on my heart a little bit. But as they go through this act, I feel like I played this act in like 2 hours, like in one sitting, because I enjoyed the combat so much. Chio is so strong with her melee combat and like her like stab attacks that she has with her knife. She has no range whatsoever, and because Afur has that like swap mechanic, I would like try to, instead of just doing the lob and have people kind of like swap with me and hit them, I would go and try to get really close to a character, swap them with Chio, and then have Chio like stab attack them all the time, and that was really, really fun. So I think,
did you? There's maybe we had different experiences here, because my Chio did have a ranged attack. There's a character that you meet along your way, and it's kind of like, I'm not gonna like try to guess what culture this is representative of, but it's like more of a foreign. She's like kind of a mystic, basically.
Sure.
But she has a rifle, and you can recruit her to join the party, and you go with her. Basically, she's been wronged like in some way by the Red Company, as you have, so she joins the party for a bit. But when she leaves the party, she teaches Chio how to use the rifle and gives Chio a rifle. So my Chio had that thing on her.
Damn,
and was
dude.
keeping it strapped.
That's awesome.
But that was the first time, I think you mentioned you got to play as somebody with a rifle.
Maybe
earlier.
that's who it was. Yeah.
But that was the first time I had access to the rifle. And man, the whole time I was playing the game, a lot of the enemies you're going up against have guns of some form. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God, guns are so like overpowered, like compared to what I'm using, like the bows and arrow melee attacks. And when I finally got the rifle, I was like, let's go, dude. It is my turn. And oh my God, it is so effective in combat. Yeah. Like it does so much damage. The projectile is super fast, obviously, because it's a bullet. But it literally just like changes the way the combat goes, just having one rifle in your party. So that was super sick.
The
And
range
yeah,
of that attack is like the whole map too. You know, even your
exactly.
arrows have like a max range, so you have to get close always and stuff. But with this one, it's everywhere. But yeah, I think maybe that's what I was thinking about. I don't even know. I think I had someone with it, but I'm thinking about this person, but I don't remember them teaching Chio anything. So maybe I didn't have that option, or I played it in a different way. But as Chio and Afura are trying to make this transaction, it always keeps going wrong, and they can never really make it happen. And then you realize who's behind all of this bad stuff, and it's the Red Company again. There's a really cool like aside that Chio and Afur have in this like old temple that they go through, and it's kind of like maybe slightly creepy. They have no idea what they're gonna find inside. There may or may not be like, you know, some like living dead like skeletons and stuff in there, and the third person that you find, they're like, you know what, y'all go ahead, I'm staying out here, I'm not going with you guys. And so you go in, and you have all of these fights, but there's a secret fight, maybe if you want to call it that you can find in there. There's a corridor that it's like dark, and if you go and try to go in there, there's an ambush that happens. But when the ambush happens, you immediately lose 3 HP. And as Ben mentioned, Chio and Afur, they don't have a lot of HP because it's two characters. Like, they try to make them a little bit more glass cannon-y. And I think that made it so that I only had like 1 HP on one of them and 2 HP on the other one. And then because you're ambushed, the enemies move first. And so then they immediately hit me with like an attack of like 2 damage. And so I couldn't, literally, it was impossible for me to even have an action in this fight. And I was talking to someone on the Discord, and they had the same experience. And so what I had to do is, because I had to kind of just replay this fight over and over and over again and try to get a different RNG, so that as soon as I got into the fight, the enemies wouldn't hit me immediately, and instead they would like maybe do a ranged attack or something, because that gives you a chance to escape. And finally, after like 5 or 6 retries, I was able to do it. I think Afur immediately died, but my Chio was so overpowered with her like 5 damage like stab attack that I was just running around and getting everyone. She was just the most fun character, I think. But yeah, just lots of secrets in this one, lots of decisions that you can make to either have some guilt and kind of go that one path, or be more like protagonist hero vibes and go down a different path. But eventually, basically what ends up happening is you are kind of like up to here with the Red Company, and everything that you're trying to do like doesn't go well. So you end up going into this like one of their like settlements or something, and you go and confront them, and you sneak past them, and then you are trying to like blow up the place or something, or at least you have that option. Like Chio and Afura are having this conversation, but it ends up like kind of backfiring a little bit, and you get into this huge massive fight, and that fight was pretty difficult as well, and something happens right before the fight starts. Ben, you want to walk us through?
Yeah, so you basically you go into this kind of settlement where these newcomers, these Red Company guys, are hanging out, and you decide, now that you're here, let's blow it up. So you're like, let's go outside and find the best place to plant some dynamite. You go out, and it's just like you're surrounded by Red Company people, basically. And pretty much what happens is Chio and Afur get split up in the fight, because it's such like a mayhem, like it's a huge melee, so you get split up. And the game asks you, like, this is going to be a separate fight. Who do you want to play as? Do you want to play as Chio or Afur? And so I think, like you, I was like having more fun as Chio, and like I said, I was keeping that thing on when I had the rifle, so I was like, I gotta go Chio.
Yeah.
But so it's a solo fight. This whole time you've been fighting with Afur and with Chio, but it's a solo fight as whoever you pick. And what happens is basically you get through the fight, like you win your fight, and it's like, okay, now let's go help Afur in our case. And you go, and Afur is just like, laying on the sand, dead, basically, like missing half of their face. he's been killed somehow, like in this huge engagement. It's so sad because, like you mentioned, there's the siblings have this banter, right? And the way it plays out here is that, you're on this wild goose chase of Chio and Afur are trying to find their money. They're trying to get the dust back. They want their money. They want to find the people that ripped them off. But it just keeps escalating and escalating.
Yeah.
And like each time you get like, okay, I think we have to go here. And then it's like, nope, it's not here. Go to this other place. Nope, it's not there. Go to this other place. You just keep getting strung along, and it's this wild goose chase. And at the end, before like this final confrontation, Afur is like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like I'm not chasing these leads anymore. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the dust. Let's go home. And Chio's like, no, dude, we're so close. We have to keep going. Come on, brother. Like, we have to. We're so close now. We can't give up. Let's go. And then right after that happens, Afur like dies and gets caught in the crossfire. And it's so sad. It's like such a moment of sadness. The music hits so hard.
I was gonna say,
but
that's
then
so good.
Yeah. So tell me what happens after that, because Chio is not happy.
Chio is not happy at all, and she plants the powder keg and absolutely blows up the settlement. And at that point, like you don't really do anything. Like you're just watching this like cutscene, I guess, play out. And she kind of runs away, and she has this like vengeful, I don't know, persona that like has taken over her, and she wants to like absolutely destroy the Red Company.
To that end though, before you blow up the settlement, after you realize Afur is dead, more Red Company people like come out of nowhere and ambush you, and you have this fight where Chio, like you said, is in this like vengeance mode. She's seeing red. And you have, so the game, it's really cool. The game basically gives you like unlimited magia. All of your ability skills are extended, the reach of the abilities. So you have this fight where there's tons of Red Company soldiers, and you're just like zipping around, dashing through them, like movement that previously was impossible because the magia system is like really difficult to manage in the normal fights.
Yeah.
But you have unlimited magia, your skills are super long range, so you're just like eviscerating these Red Company soldiers, and that it was a really cool fight in my opinion.
I forgot how cool. Yeah, that I completely overlooked that. It was so much fun how that goes. And so when you finish the fight, then you blow up the settlement, and you go to the city where Itzai and Tizo are, and this like really beautiful and tragic song starts playing as you like conclude Act 4, and it's like a really beautiful like wailing singing that happens. You get like the Spanish lyrics on the screen, and underneath them I think there's an English translation so that you can understand kind of what's being said and sung,
so that the gringos like me
so that the gringos can understand it. And it's so beautiful, and it really like, again, there's so many moments in this game that just made me feel so good. It just made me feel like seen, represented. Like I seldom play games that have like music or a score all in Spanish and stuff, and it was really awesome, but also extremely tragic. Like every act is not great. Like it doesn't finish in a good note. It's everything is sad. And basically there's a really funny moment again. Like the developers like were good with kind of combating the tragedy with some like goofy moments when Chio makes her way to the city where Itzai and Tizo is, and she goes to the bar and tells the barkeep, who knows Chio and knows Afur, and he's like, hey, where's Afur? And she's like, pour me a shot or something, like he's not coming or something like that. And then the barkeep is like, damn. And then she takes her shot or whatever, she turns around, and then she sees Itzai, or like I think it said like, and then Chio sees a Kanek and an Iyo tribe member arm wrestling, and it's just like, I don't know, I just thought that was really funny. And you can see the two little figurines arm wrestling, and that's kind of how Act 4 concludes. I was gonna mention something like they, when indie developers make these games, like, man, they just do so many little touches. Like, that the games come from the heart, and every time you load the game in every different act, there's a different like main menu like screen that appears. And the Act 5 menu hits hard, man. That one, you know that you're there. You know that you've played every single character's like, half story, and you're trying to finish the game. And it's just Tizo looking out into the desert. The desert is like red, obviously alluding to like, the bloodshed. It's like really, really red, and all the like, kind of like rudimentary machinery, like as Ben said. You're going ham now on the newcomers, and you know that you have the tribe together, the clan together, and you're going to seek your revenge. So why don't you tell us kind of how that plays out?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been building throughout the whole game so far. This is really a vengeance tale, right?
Yeah.
Like ultimately it's a vengeance tale. So we've been building up to this moment the whole time. We now have 3, party members. We've got Tizo, we've got Itai, and we've got Chio or Afur, whichever one you picked. And they all have been wronged by the Red Company, wronged by, El Gallo, the newcomers. And yeah, it all points back to this one guy, El Gallo, who is, you've been hearing about him through the game. You hear about him. He's the big boss of the Red Company. He's untouchable. He runs things in the Red Company. And, they're out for the dust. They want to, basically use up all the dust. They want to remove the magic from the world, basically. And they're also after the oil that's in the sands. So there's these huge, bad guys, right? But you get to Act 5, the party is all together. All of you have a singular focus, which is kill El Gallo. And it is time to do exactly that. So you head out from the major city that you've all kind of congregated in, through happenstance, basically. You head out, you get the location of their main kind of headquarters where El Gallo is, and it's go time. Like, you get there, you start lighting their silos on fire, destroying all their equipment. Like, you're here, it's time to raise hell. You're killing everybody you see, people are running, you're lighting everything on fire, and it's just like, it's confrontation time. We've led up to this the whole game. It's confrontation time. And then, you go through a few fights, and you get ultimately to El Gallo, but he's not really what you were expecting. Do you wanna, or maybe he is what you were expecting. He's more of a realistic depiction, given all this than probably what I was thinking.
100%.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
I feel like I had that in my mind. Maybe like I knew that this guy wasn't gonna be like the big bad guy with like 3 machine guns, and he's like gonna be like No, he's just this like. He's just this capitalist overlord, He's just this fat guy who is like in charge of the settlement, and he's just super lame, and you immediately hate him. But you still have to do a big bad fight. So my guy runs away, and he goes into this like huge like machine, because they're doing like oil drilling and stuff. So there's like this big drill, there's like this big huge saw, and it kind of like all looks like this like big like robot basically that you have to fight, where there's 3 health bars. There's the saw arm, there's like a drill arm or something that like throws projectiles at you, and then El Gallo. And so you play as Tizo, Itzai, and Chio, and you have to, maneuver between all of these fights. And as you blow up all the different components that make up this like robot, that's kind of how you get through the fight. But there's some really interesting things that they do with this fight. Obviously, there's like a lot of health, so the fight isn't super quick. It's pretty long. But there's also this like, because they have like a railway system, there's these little carts that also like appear in the battlefield, and you have to dodge them, because if you're on their way, then they'll hit you. You can also blow them up, and then that deals damage too. So if you can time it right, you can make it so that you are hitting El Gallo, and you can like decrease his health. So I didn't think this fight was hard. I think at this point you're super locked in with how the characters work. You also have 3 characters, where sometimes you only have 1 or sometimes you only have 2. So that's to your advantage. They're all super kitted out. The skill tree at this point is kind of completely maxed out. But it does kind of end in this like really, at least you think, this really like awesome fight. I think the music in some of these fights, especially when you fight against the newcomers, is totally different from like the music that you hear throughout the game in the different like tragic story beats that happen. Instead, it's like electric guitar. It's like really like kind of strong and kind of music that like makes you feel like, okay, I'm like in a fight, right now. So that contrast, I think it's really cool. When it's only like the kind of like, the original characters, I guess is what I'm trying to say, like the people that live in this world, and they're not the newcomers. The music is almost like folky in like a good way. Whereas when it's the newcomers, they like come with this like electricity, even though they don't really have anything electrical, I don't think. But how was the fight for you?
No, so yeah, I mean, it was super fun just from the perspective that it was like the most unique fight in the game by far. Like it's the first time it's like, there's plenty of fights throughout gaming in general that are similar to this fight, right? Where you've got a guy or gal or whatever, like controlling some big like mech essentially. And it's got, different arms and weapons and stuff, and you have to kind of take them out individually. But I thought, working that into the combat here was super interesting and fun. You have to, like you said, dodge the rail carts, and, hit these strategically placed video game red barrels that blow up the different arms and stuff like that. And eventually you destroy the machine. For me, oh my God, it was so close. I tried this fight a few times. I think I lost a few times. And on the attempt that I won, it literally was both of my last characters were dead, and it was just Tizo left.
Oh my God.
And Tizo had like 1 health. And I was like trying so hard to get it. I had like 1 health. El Gallo had like 1 health remaining. I had to hit 1 more shot, and I was just like praying for my life to make it out of this fight, and I barely got it.
Oh
so
my
it was
God.
so tight. But eventually you do it. You destroy the machine. El Gallo doesn't die. He's out of the machine somehow, and he takes off running.
Yeah.
And Tizo just takes off after him. So it's Tizo now chasing El Gallo. And eventually, this chase leads you to the magic tree, the spirit tree from the beginning of the game. And so the spirit tree in the beginning of the game was like very full. It was like, a very healthy looking tree, lots of leaves and stuff like that. And now, all of the resources of this land have been exploited by El Gallo and the newcomers, to the point where the tree is like decrepit looking, basically. It looks like it's dying. It's a very stark contrast to the beginning of the game. But, El Gallo runs here. He gets to the base of the tree where the encounter at the very beginning of the game, where Tizo was Tekko, happens. Mm-hmm. It's, the same setting, so it's very full circle in that way. And El Gallo, like, tries to fight you himself. He just has, like, a little revolver, basically, that at this point in the game, maybe at one point that was scary, but at this point in the game, you're like, bro, you got to do more than that. Yeah. So Tizo, dispatches him very quickly. Yeah. And kind of that's the end to El Gallo's narrative.
This is this fight was cool because because it's Mesoamerican inspired, but it's like a Western themed kind of game. But you're the other side. You're not playing as the gringos or the cowboys. You are not that at all.
Right.
And it was really cool because you have that like high noon battle 1-on-1, like who's quicker on the gun. Whereas like you said, at this point you're super kitted out. El Gallo has just his puny gun, which at this point you think is puny. And my guy Tizo, I had the skill that like he shoots 4 arrows in a row. It's like pa 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 pa.
Yeah, same thing.
So
yeah,
exactly.
Just the barrage.
Exactly. So I unleashed the barrage on him. And leading up to this fight, though, Tizo had gotten shot, and so you win this battle against El Gallo, and you kill him, and then finally Tizo's revenge has finished. And when exactly where the story took place, where the revenge kind of happened, or the mistreatment happened when the Red Company killed his clan, this is where he ends. And so he kind of like crawls towards the tree, and he just rests against it, and then eventually he passes, and then Itsai and Chio come around and they find him, and they have this little moment where they say like that he looks peaceful and that maybe we should leave him here, but then Itsai's like, no, come on, let's get him and let's give him like a proper burial. The cool thing about it is that throughout this whole game, Tiso, whenever he has like a break or something, he's carving a little figurine. And when people ask him about what it is, he's always like, oh, it's something that I do in my free time, like it's not really that big a deal. But really what he's working towards is making a new offering to the sacred tree. That's what his family was doing. You obviously realize that he is Teko, and that's what they were trying to do. Every year or so often, they would go to the sacred tree and they would give them offerings so that their lives could be full, of magia, or obviously like good fortune and stuff. And, they're just giving back to the land. And so that, that is so plentiful for them, and they love living there. So he was just trying to do that. And then at the end of the game, the last thing that you see is that a little small plant is sprouting from Tiso's figurine and Tiso's offering to the sacred tree. And so that like, hey, the world is gonna heal, the sacred tree is gonna kind of like live again, and hopefully the land will kind of be full of magia one more time. And yeah, I don't know, it like touched me a lot. That was such a really, even though it was a tragic ending because Tiso ended up dying, it was kind of beautiful to end in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And it was very much, yeah, exactly. Like it was a very satisfying conclusion to Tiso Teko's tale. Like it felt like it was wrapped up in a very, in a good way, in a satisfying way.
And then the credits roll, and there was something really interesting at the end of the credits. And basically the developers, thank you for playing the game, and they say, yo, if you finish the game, go to www.arcogame/gameover.com or something like that. And so you go to it, and they have this web page set up where it says, hey, thank you so much for playing our game. I hope, we hope that you enjoy it, that you enjoyed it a lot. And why don't you send us a letter telling us how much you're enjoying the game, and we will send you something back. So Ben, I'm here to tell you that today, literally on the last day of the month, because I'm so bad and I forgetful a little bit, I had sent my letter to them, so that I told them how much I love the game. I put a note in Spanish there for them, obviously, because this game meant a lot to me as a Salvadorian. And I told them about how we played this game for Video Game Book Club, and that we were so happy to pick this game. So yeah, I'm waiting to hear back. Obviously, I sent it today, so I'm sure it's gonna take a couple of weeks or something. But I just wanted to update. I will update the VGBC community whenever hopefully I hear back.
That's the best. I mean, that's the best part of these like indie studios, right? Is there's such a human element to it. Yeah. And like you said, the little note at the end of the credits is like very easy to miss. It's just like the very last line, like maybe you're not even paying attention at this point. It just says like, if you're still like here, go to this link. And it's like, oh, what's that? And you go, and it's like, I don't know. It's just so sweet. Like it's such a great way to interact with your community, especially for a smaller game like this. Like this is a game that really hasn't gotten a ton of like widespread attention. No. I would say like there's a very passionate fan base, and like people love anyone who plays this game loves this game. 100%. Like we love this game. But I feel like it hasn't had that mainstream breakthrough. And because of that, it feels like there is such like an intimate connection between the player and the developer, especially for someone like yourself that has like cultural roots in more of these kind of themes. So yeah, that's just so special. Like it's one of the things that's so representative of one of the things that like makes games great and such a effective means of storytelling.
So good. Developers were so proud of you guys for this game. And I think one of the developers said that they were surprised about how the game didn't sell as well as maybe other indie games, and maybe that expectation was really high for them. But I'm here to tell them that for us, it was an incredible experience, and I just wanted to say thank you. Again, even though I said it in my letter, but thank you for making this game.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna take a little break. We've gone through the whole 5 acts of Arco, and we're gonna come back with the second half of Video Game Book Club to answer questions that listeners have sent to us on the Discord and questions that we have prepared for ourselves as well. So we'll be right back after this. Welcome to part 2 of the show, where we answer questions that you sent to us on the Discord. Ben, if someone wants to join Video Game Book Club, what can they do?
Join the Discord, bro. Join the club. Join the club. You gotta join the club. No, in all seriousness, I feel like this past month we've had like more engagement in the Discord than like ever before. Like it's everybody, we've had more people kind of playing the games along with us and just like chatting as we go, like sharing clips, just like talking about random stuff in the off-topic channel. It's been super fun. Like it's such a good vibe. So if you like the show, first of all, like and subscribe to like the videos, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias, buenalegames, and join the club. Like it's a good vibe. We're all hanging out, playing the games, chatting. Join the club.
Join the club. It's an incredible vibe, and all we want to do is play the same games and just talk about it as we go along. It's just so much fun.
Yeah,
Video Game Book Club.
That's awesome.
That's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. Ben, why don't you ask me the first question of Video Game Book Club from the Discord?
Yeah, so if you're playing the games along with us and you want to submit your questions, we have a viewer question channel in Discord where throughout the month you can kind of submit them as you go. We've got some, recurring characters that always bring the heat with their questions, and we've got another one of those this month. So Joe from the VGBC Discord asks a great question, and one that I feel like you're going to have the best perspective on. So Joe says, one of the things that got me excited about Arco was the opportunity to learn more about the mythology and culture of Mesoamerica. Now, having played the game, it seems as though it was advertised as a focus of the setting really was more kind of secondary. It could have just as easily been advertised as taking place in the American West without really changing much of the content. How did you two find this balance? Do you feel like there was kind of sufficient truth in Arco's advertising?
That's a great question, and one that maybe hit me a little bit hard. Like parts of those questions I completely agreed with, at least at the beginning of the game. So whenever I first started playing the game, and yes, this was saying like, hey, this is like a Mesoamerican like adventure, and I was like, oh my god, sign me up. Mesoamerica is like a vast region. It's not just like Mexico and like that's southwest US. It's Mexico, it's Central America, and it's that kind of southwest US portion, which is so much. There's so many different civilizations that like lived in all of that space. And so I was thinking like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do it. Of course, the game starts and you think, okay, the first kind of tribe that you're in is this kind of like Western, like United States, like civilization thing. And so I was kind of like, all right, I'm ready to, where's the next thing? I think the game found a really good balance because, as I mentioned previously, they grabbed a lot of like what makes all the other cultures distinct and put them in this world. I think it probably would have been harder for like an indie studio to sprawl like a huge like continental adventure, like something like a AAA game maybe can do with like a huge open world and like really see all these different civilizations. I think that they brought the best parts or like the most distinct parts of each, like Aztecas and the Mayas, in Taxuan or Tuxaun, and like the more like Andes civilization with the Incas a little bit, and Chileans in like the monks, where you see that. And of course you have like the northern Mexico, southwest US with like the EO tribe and other tribes that you find. So, they do try. I think one thing that Joe really touches on that I think that's something that was missed was the mythology. There's a lot of like me growing up, like there's so many like folk tales, there's so much like mythology or like different like kind of like ghost stories that are, part of like my upbringing, as like a Salvadorian, and like learning about all the like, obviously El Salvador is like the kind of like the end tip of like the Mayan civilization. Those are like the ruins that we have, and kind of where we come from. The language being Nahuatl, and the kind of part of the Mayans being Los Pipiles. And yeah, I don't know. I thought that was missed a little bit. Like there wasn't, it was all like insects and bugs that you fight, but not a lot of like, big like mythological like beings maybe that they could have added with this magia aspect that the game has. So I guess, is Arco like falsely advertising? I don't think so. I think they like grabbed the landscape that they're more familiar with, which is this like Western US, and they just added a bunch of content in there that like kind of pays respect to all the different like tribes or civilizations that existed in Mesoamerica and beyond a little bit. Obviously, like Peru and Chile isn't really Mesoamerica anymore, but that's okay. I still felt represented, so that's cool. But I think they could have done a little bit more with mythology. And honestly, if this game had sold better, maybe they would think about making Arco 2 or something, and something that would touch a little bit more on that. But, they kind of put as much as they could in this game, and I don't really fault them for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In terms of whether or not it was like false advertising, I don't agree with that at all. Like I think there's a difference between the narrative structure and the setting. And I think like the narrative structure, which maybe is what Joe's more talking about, is like very typical Western. Like this is a Western type, like, narrative. You've got the kind of gruff good guys, out to get the bad guys. It's very much a tale of vengeance. Like it's a very classic Western narrative. Like, and that's where he's right. Like it could be, cowboys. It could be whatever other peoples you want to like drop into this narrative, right? But the devs are very intentional with their selection of it. Like it's not just randomly, picking a person or a type of people to drop in. Like I feel like there's sufficient kind of respect given to the different types of people that are in this game. And yeah, it feels very intentional to me of like doing a classic Western narrative, but doing it and suffusing it with these cultures and these different types of people and seeing it from a different perspective. So yeah, while I agree that like the structure of the narrative could be, really about anything, I don't really agree that it wasn't like, sufficiently Mesoamerican enough. Like I think through the music and through some of the different cultural aspects, I feel like it kind of lived up to what I was envisioning it as. And I think you're definitely right. Like they introduced the fantasy and the magic elements, so there's no reason why there couldn't be more of like an emphasis on some of those types of things, and like leaning into some of those mythological aspects for sure would have been very cool. And there's like a little bit of that. Like there's points where they talk about, ghosts in the desert, and like, oh, be careful who you talk to because it might be a ghost, and you can like encounter some people that turn out to be ghosts, and like it. So there's just like the little bit of that, and like maybe that's like mythology, maybe it's not, I have no idea, but it's like the themes are clearly there. So it definitely is something that could have been done to maybe just bring it to a new level of really implementing that kind of cultural representation.
Yeah, they kind of gave us a window into that world, and you and I and the VGPC folk, like we like landed like feet first, like super excited to do it, and it's one of those things like I think in a different world, or maybe if this game had been received differently, like they would have expanded on that. So this was just like the intro, and I feel like Arco could have been like something to be expanded upon, and maybe they would have done more of that. So yeah, I think there was sufficient culture. I definitely liked it, a lot. So I don't know. I felt that the culture was represented pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can always do a little bit more. But I think it was pretty good. It was fine. Ben, which of the 4 characters did you enjoy the most and wanted to spend more time with?
Yeah, I think so. It's a difference between like which one I enjoyed the most, because I think the one I enjoyed the most was Itse, just because of how funny she was. Like I feel like there was more comedy in her kind of dialogues than the rest of anybody else, because she's just so like gruff and I don't know, to the point and very like sarcastic in different ways. So like I enjoyed sort of the narrative portion of hers the most. But in terms of like the combat, I think definitely Aforinchio was just like so much fun. Like their style of combat, the like twin system of like swapping in and out and like kind of using one to complement the other was awesome, and I loved that. Um, but yeah, I mean, my boy Tizo, like I would have loved to have spent more time with him, and I think we spent like sufficient time. Like by the end of the game, you have like very much an emotional connection with all of these
Yeah.
characters. Um, but yeah, I mean, all of them, like they were all very well written. The narrative was really good. So yeah, but my favorite from like a story perspective, I'd say Itai, and from gameplay, Afarenchio for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chio and Afura are like they're so fun, and that was like I mentioned previously. I feel like that was the peak of the combat. Kind of started with them. I think that because Afur passed in ours, like I wish I would have had more time with him. That's just more like a sentimental answer. And I think Tiso though, like Tiso really is the main character of the game. It's his kind of revenge story, even though the other three characters have their own paths that lead to the same conclusion. But really, you know him since he's a kid, since he's Deco, and then kind of he becomes what he becomes. So yeah, just you have this really strong emotional connection with him, and that's kind of the one I enjoyed the most for sure.
Yeah. All right, I've got a question for you. So, when I first started the game, one of the more like intriguing gameplay elements to me was the guild system.
Mm-hmm.
So, it like introduces it to you as like, hey, we talked about the ghosts that come into the combat encounters that act as sort of like a timer mechanism where you can't just sit around and plan all day. You have to act because if not, the ghosts are going to come attack you. Um, and I thought that was super interesting. I thought it was like a great way to kind of blend the RTS with the like turn-based kind of natures of the game. Um, but I feel like overall the guild system didn't like impact the game as much as I thought it would. And maybe that's because I didn't make as many like bad conscious decisions as you did. So I don't know. I left it like I think I got an achievement when I beat the game saying you finished the game with low guilt. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Like, I didn't really know where I stood with guilt, so that's fine, I guess. But yeah, I was just kind of interested in your thoughts. Obviously, you alluded a little bit to like having more, to do with the guild system. So yeah, I was just kind of interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the guild system is the best decision that they made for this game, because you're right. Like how is this game different than a turn-based game if you don't have the guild system? At the end of the day, like all you're really seeing is you pick a action in like the turn-based portion, and then you just see it play out. But that's like kind of like any other turn-based game, kind of. But with the guild system, like you have that timer, you have that kind of like urgency to play quicker, to think faster, to see where you want to move, to understand the paths that the projectiles that are coming at you at full speed are going to go. So I think it was really smart. It also makes it so that you can play this game at the difficulty that you desire. So instead of doing like an easy, normal, hard, where there are more ghosts if you do hard, this game was like, no, depending on what you do in the game will be more difficult or it won't. And so I loved the challenge, and I was like, hell yeah, let's do as much guilt as I can with Tiso. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe like the conclusion of the game, like the story is going to be the same. I think there's little different things that happen within the smaller like story arcs between each character, depending on the guilt that you have. Yes, does it impact the story that much? Not really. Do you have maybe more little secrets and more engaging fights? For sure. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the guild system was awesome. And the only thing I would have wanted is maybe actually have something more visual represented in how much guilt you have, because then you can really say like, okay, I'm playing the game in this way, and that's kind of the path that I want to take, and I'm full guilt, and that would help me make decisions whether I want to do more guilt stuff or less guilty stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I like I said, I had no idea where I was with guilt. I think there was like one time where you find like a skeleton or something, and the skeleton has like a medallion, and the game asks you, like, do you want to take the medallion? And, it's like, you can take it, but you're kind of like desecrating it if you do that. So that's like a high guilt thing to do. And like, I took the medallion and it said like, oh, your guilt has been impacted by this. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. Like, I'm not doing that, bro. You caught me. But yeah, like I had, like, to your point, I had no idea where I stood with the guilt. Like, occasionally there would be something that said like your soul is relieved or like your soul is burdened by this or something. But like, there were like plenty of ghosts in my combat encounters, so I was like, I don't, like, maybe I'm low guilt, maybe I'm high.
Yeah,
like, I have no idea.
The enemies also spawn ghosts, so it's kind of tough to know like how guilty or how full your guilt meter is. I think the first time I got like a guilt message was actually in Act 1 when I was Techo. I think like maybe your grandpa's telling you a story and you can like stop listening to him or something like that, and I was like, bro, like, you know me, I never want to read the stuff.
My God.
So like I'm so bad with like lore things. And so I'm just like X, yeah, for sure. And then I was like, all right, whatever. And then I got guilt, Techo feels heavy because my bro didn't listen to his grandpa, or something.
So funny.
And I was like, oof, yeah, caught, like, my bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was really smart. Okay, Ben, I have a tough question for you. And we talked about this a little bit, so I want to hear a little bit more of your thoughts. So why do you think this game didn't sell well? And as I mentioned, one of the developers of the game said that they thought maybe the over-ingenuity of the game was its demise.
I don't have a good reason. Like, to me, if you enjoy these types of like kind of tactical combat games, you're going to like this game. Like, I really don't know. I think the challenge with indie games is always just getting it in front of the right people. And I think there's like, ways to do that now with like, subreddits and Reddit posts, YouTube videos, stuff like that. But like, I don't know. I think just getting it in front of the right people is difficult to do as a smaller developer. And you're really relying on, all these crazy systems we have in place to like recommend games to the right people. So I don't know, like there was nothing playing the game where I was like, this is like maybe, a little dicey or whatever. Like, I enjoyed it thoroughly throughout. So there was nothing where I felt like, oh, maybe this could turn people off. Like, if you just don't like the genre, if you don't like these like kind of more indie pixel art, like tactical combat games, you might not like it. But I mean, if you have any sort of inclination toward these games, I think you're going to like this game. So I don't really know, but like in some way I'm happy that we can now be a part of that process where we can like, we have a group of people, like a handful of people that bought this game because of us, right? And like, I feel good about that. Like, we're indirectly supporting these, developers through doing that. And I feel really, proud to do that because I think it's an important game, right? Like, there's so many of these opportunities with these cultures that, everybody knows about, but maybe aren't as commonly explored. Like, I feel like Nine Souls is another good example. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of references to this kind of Taoist culture that everyone's vaguely aware of, but isn't maybe fully explored. So I feel like that is such a ripe opportunity for indie games to kind of explore that culture through these games with really interesting combat mechanics and stories. And I'd love to see more of that. So as I don't know, do you have thoughts as to like why this game might not have sold well? Like, to me, it's just like that's kind of the nature of the beast when you're a small developer. Like, it might just, if you don't have someone really pushing the game, like it's kind of a roll of the dice, unfortunately.
That's exactly the same thought that I have. It's a roll of the dice. I mean, it's a total crapshoot at the end of the day. I am 1,000,000% sure that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of genuinely incredible games in Steam that have 50 reviews, Totally. Like, it's just, there's way too many games nowadays, and there are so many talented people out there, and now anyone can make a game. And I don't want to sound like that. I don't want that to sound reductive. Oh, anyone can make a really good game. But genuinely though, like there's so many good games that come out, and unfortunately it's kind of a roll of the dice. It's a timing of when the game releases. It's everything from the name of the game to like the main character and how they look, to the first wallpaper that you see, to your the podcast that you listen to, or the YouTubers that you like to watch, or the journalists that you like to read their pieces online. All of that kind of has to magically coincide for a game to blow up. I was looking before this podcast at like, Polygon wrote an article about how amazing this game is. Like Gamer Rant or whatever did one too. Like you look up Arco and you find all these articles online about how awesome the game is. And then also a little portion of the article says something like, and the game didn't sell that well. Now, I kind of didn't really realize that the game didn't sell that well until I finished the game and I was like doing my research on like, what the developers and what this game is all about. And yeah, it's just sad. I don't know if it's sad. I mean, I enjoyed this game. I'm happy to promote it. I'm happy to be part of like the new kind of like Arco community, and hopefully like through our voice, more people are going to be aware of this game and they'll buy it. And yeah, I just all I can do is I kind of look at the developer, hopefully, in the eye and say, I'm sorry, this game's awesome. Like I wish you have like 1 million sales,
Yeah.
But I have no idea, no clue. I'm just a lad, I'm not a marketing director. I'm not a game developer by any means. I'm not sure what else can be different. I think the art is gorgeous. I think the music is beautiful. And I think obviously the gameplay is really fun. So you have this perfect combination for a game that is like a perfect length too, for an indie game, like a 10 to 12 hour game that you can replay a couple times, make different decisions, increase that difficulty organically by choosing different answers to questions. And yeah, you have an awesome package, but unfortunately it just didn't reach the right people.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can do our part though, right? Like that's the awesome part of this thing is like, if you're listening to this right now and maybe you haven't heard of the game, and it sounds at all interesting to you, like go buy it, play it. Yeah. If you're at all interested in this, you're gonna like the game. So I'm looking at you viewers. I'm looking at you right now. If this is like interesting to you, go play the game and then leave a Steam review like saying, hey, Video Game Book Club sent me. Like how sick would that be? That would be so unbelievably awesome to be able to support the developers of this game in that way. So yeah.
Do you have another question, Benny?
That's all I've got.
Okay, relax. I got you, brother. So one of the things that we didn't talk about this that much is that there's so many freaking items in the game. So many. You have all of your skills, but you can also throw some items, and there's like, a bunch of throwable items, different things that you can do. Which item was your favorite? Which one were you relying on a lot if you were in a pinch in battle?
Oh man, I think I probably set the world record for like a number of bandages used. Like you can use a bandage to instantly restore 3 hearts. Yeah. I think all of my characters had like 5 bandages each going into every battle. Like it's crazy. But so that was like occupying one of my slots without a doubt. And then from there, the dynamite obviously is huge, having like an AoE explosion. But then I also got a lot of mileage out of the machete. So the machete is an item you can find where it basically gives you like a melee interrupt attack. So I would put that on like, a character like Afur, who doesn't have as much like melee combat. Like if you find yourself in a pinch and you can't get out, then you have like the machete to fall back on and you can do like a melee attack. So I felt using items like that. And there's like, the inverse of that as well with like throwing knives, where you can kind of give a character that's more melee focused, like a ranged option. So yeah, all of the items were super good, but I think those were probably the 2 that I used the most for sure.
I think I definitely underutilized the item function in the game. I was relying a lot on my like skills and the abilities that my characters have. So I was also kind of healing if I needed to. The dynamite is really good. I think there's some items that like makes your next attack be a poison attack, or makes your next attack deal more damage, or your next like ranged attack will pierce or something. And I really underutilized those a lot. It was all about healing, and if I grabbed like a dynamite or AoE attack, definitely will use it. And then I would save all of my machetes and ropes and everything for finding secrets in the overworld. So your machete can cut vines, and then you can find like secret rooms, and your rope, you can like, I don't know, go on around a cliff or whatever and find like a secret dungeon or something. So I was trying to hoard those, so I didn't use them as much, but that's really interesting. To use the machete in a pinch is really smart. Did you make a decision that you would have taken differently now that you've played the game?
I don't think so. I think like the two major decisions I'm thinking of are Itzai going to the arena or the temple and choosing Afur or Chio. Like those to me are the two like narratively changing decisions. There might be more that I'm not thinking of, but those are the two big ones. And yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see how the narrative like kind of expands going to the temple as Itai. But ultimately, I thought the arena was really fun. And going back, choosing between Afur and Chio again, like I think Chio, like I was just having the most fun with Chio, so I probably would have picked them again. Yeah.
I completely agree. I think those are like the two kind of main decisions. I wish that I would have done the arena. And I wish that I would have done the guilt forward like playthrough as intended, as I wanted to, but I just kind of messed up, and then one wrong decision that I took, and then I literally couldn't complete that quest anymore. I want to play the game again if I have time. It's hard with BGVC and life in general, but I want to play it again so I can do like the 3 medallion pieces and see where that leads me, and that kind of maybe secret ending or secret dungeon that I would love to do. I think that Afur combined with Itzae would be like super fun to see like that kind of swapping mechanic and seeing them play together would have been fun. But I kind of can't bring myself for Chio to die. Like that's really sad. So if I make that
it's sad either way.
It's sad either way. Yeah, it's sad either way.
I agree.
And then finally, Ben, which tribe would you like to live with the most or live in the most?
I don't know, man. I don't know that I'm cut out for it. Like, I feel like the Ayo tribe, just because they're the most, like, I guess, pastoral. Like, it's just, they're kind of out in the fields, like, kind of tending animals, like, just doing their own thing. Like, the Kanek tribe is so, I don't know, intense in their combat and stuff like that. I don't think I'm cut out for that. I don't have that dog in me. And then, the tribe that Afur and Chio originate from is very much like nomadic, I would say, in a way, like kind of merchant oriented. And I'm a chill guy, bro. I like to just kind of settle. I like to settle down. I like to have my little spot. So I feel like probably Ayo for me.
I would definitely love to live in Tuxaun. I would love to live in the big city with the Canics. I think it is super intense, and we'll see if I do have that dog in me. But I would love to. I think that would be the tribe that I would pick. I mean, also obviously like the Aztec Mayan like kind of combination that they went with Tuxaun. I think it's really what like also calls to me more, obviously. So I would, that's the one that I would like. But Ben, that's all the questions that I have. So why don't you give me your final thoughts on Arco?
Oh, man. Yeah. Arco, first of all, I just have to say, like, I'm so happy that we found this game. I think that's, like, the great part about Video Game Book Club is having the opportunity to play games that you maybe normally wouldn't. Like, if not for this, I don't think I ever would have played this game. But I'm so happy to have found it and to have played it. I think the combat was so well thought out and so, like, I don't know, just well done. I think it was very unique in a lot of ways. So I thought that was so well done. The visuals of the game, I could see how somebody might, like, be turned off by it. Like, it's pixel art taken to, like, a very extreme degree. Like, some parts of it are more intricately detailed, but like, the characters and stuff like that, the character portraits are very well done, but the characters themselves in the game are like this big and like they're like all of like 5 pixels. Like so I could see how that would like be a turn off maybe to a few people. But but the overall vibe of the game with the visuals like made for some really incredible backdrops and some really incredible moments. So visually it was awesome, combat was awesome. I loved the audio of the game, like we already talked about. The overall narrative was awesome as well. I really liked that revenge story. So yeah, for me, if I'm giving it a letter grade, this for me is like an A. I think it's an A, especially given the small like development team behind it. Like kudos to them. It's a great game. I hope that, we can do our small part in getting it in the hands of some more people and, reinforcing that this is a good product. Like it's really well made and I like it a lot.
Back to back A titles for VGBC 2025. We are absolutely cracked, Ben. We just pick the bangers from all the bangers. It's too good. I completely echo everything that you say. That you said. I enjoyed this game thoroughly. It's one of those things where you you played this game for the first time and you look at the time and you've played for 5 hours and you're like, what the hell? Like, where did the time go? That's kind of how really the game hooked me from the beginning. I think the combat is so fun and it's fleshed out really, really well. And yeah, you just like love the characters and you just go from tragedy to tragedy to tragedy and you just kind of like are waiting for that kind of final moment to release and like the climax of the, to feel cathartic about everything that happened. And then it happens at the end of the game and you just kind of feel like vindicated a little bit, but like sad, with what happened to Tiso. But then you kind of feel that hopefulness with the Sacred Tree kind of like, reviving essentially. And so all of like they made an incredible game. They gave us a complete package of what they were envisioning, and I give them props. Like I hope that they don't think that they over engineered this game. I think the game is totally fine as is. And I hope that the next kind of experiment, the next game that they develop has the same engineering and ingenuity behind it, because these developers are clearly talented, and I hope that they listen to this one day and they say, dang, like we need to keep going. We need to keep going with like our morals and our values of what a game should be. So I completely agree with Ben. This is an A, clear as day, and we're gonna officially stamp it. Video Game Book Club book report. It's an A. It's an Ben. Whew, we can breathe now. 2 games completed in 2025. But the thing with VGBC is that we don't stop the grind. We do not stop the grind. We finish a game and we immediately go to the next one. Why don't you let us know what you have picked for March 2025?
Yeah, that great wheel just keeps turning. And, picking a game for this month, I felt that, we've played such a diversity of games so far. We've played really small indie titles like Arco. We've played, some bigger titles from the past like Nier Automata. We've really been all over the map. But one thing we haven't been able to do so far, just because, it hasn't lined up or there hasn't been interest or whatever, I feel like we haven't done a big AAA release.
Woo!
In the past, I'm sure both of us have played plenty of these AAA titles. But I feel like it's been a little bit for me. Like I haven't played one of these really big AAA titles. The last one for me was maybe Starfield, like a year ago or so. Yeah. And that one was like, okay, it wasn't great. But seizing the opportunity, if you are, in this space at all, that Avowed has just came out. So Avowed is a game by Obsidian of RPG fame. Avowed, set in the Pillars of Eternity universe, a massive RPG set in, the setting that I really know very little about. So I'm learning a lot as I go. But man, it's really fun. It's kind of what I would think of as like next gen Skyrim. It's like everything that makes Skyrim so great with the side quests and the combat and everything, but just like given a refresh, basically, like with the different types of combat, the different, visuals and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really fun. Big AAA fantasy RPG. I think we've both already started playing it. I'm having a good time with it so far. And yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
The next gen Skyrim that took 14 years to come to us. I think Skyrim got released in 2011. So there's been a couple generations in between Skyrim and Avowed. But I completely agree with what you're saying. I haven't played a AAA game. I haven't played a game of this nature in a long time. And maybe even more than a long time. I think the last real AAA game that I played, maybe to completion, was God of War 2018. Obviously for the PlayStation. I think I got my PlayStation 5 maybe beginning of 2024, maybe 2023. I kind of quite can't remember. No, 2023. I played it then. And since then, I'm an indie game guy. And I'm a roguelike boy too. So I'm always playing those games. But with VGBC, we always have the opportunity to kind of get out of our comfort zone, to play those titles that interest us, whether they are small developers like Arco or whether they are giants like Obsidian or Square Enix with Nier Automata. So, super, super exciting that you picked this game. I have maybe about 7 hours in the game at this point now, and I just reached the main city. I haven't even gone to the main city. I'm in the first front door of it, and I'm having a good time. I'm playing as a kind of like a melee character, like a one-handed, sometimes I go two-handed melee character, and I always have that thing in my sling, bro. I'm pulling out my arquebus, I think that's how you say it, and I'm just chop. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think the one, just a little teaser for next month, but the game, it's kind of janky sometimes, but for some reason, I find it charming. I don't find it bad, because really the bugs that I find aren't like game breaking or anything in general. It's just that's kind of Skyrim funny. It's just like the T-posing, obviously maybe not extreme like that, but seagulls not really flying that well, and they're just kind of gliding and falling, and you just kind of see this world not really working that well. But that's kind of in theme with where you are and how the game is set. So I just find it hilarious, and I'm having a really good time. So good pick, Ben. Ben,
I'm excited.
Can you reiterate for us, if someone wants to play this game alongside with us, how can they do that?
Gotta join the Discord, bro. Gotta join it. I'm sorry to say, you gotta join it. Gotta join the Discord.
There's
everything.
An expert.
It's all happening. It's all happening in the Video Game Book Club Discord. We have a PoE, Pillars of Eternity lore master in the form of our good friend Joe in the Discord that is, helping us uncover all of these vast mysteries of the world. We got a lot of people playing this month. A lot of people are playing alongside it, so it's a lot of fun. Kind of talking as we go and as we discover new things in the game and play style and stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun so far. If you want to play Avowed alongside us, definitely join the VGBC Discord to keep up with all that and get involved. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to our monthly show. Please do all the YouTube stuff so that you can always look at us in your homepage next month whenever we talk about Avowed. That will be the March 2025 episode. And as always, we're going to release it on the first Monday of the month. So be on the lookout for that. I guess it would be, the first Monday of April, we'll have the Avowed episode released. Thanks again for being with us. I hope you have a good rest of your month, hopefully playing Avowed alongside with us. And that's it for us this month. Thank you and bye.
Bye.